Hey guys, it is Dr. Will, America's #1 leadership life trainer, and I am extremely excited this morning to be joining you on this Google Hangout. This Google Hangout is going to be transformational. I know you probably hear people say that all the time, but I'm telling you, if I have any credibility with you, trust me, this conversation that I'm going to be having with my good friend Pamela Jolly is going to reshape and reconfigure your mindset on building wealth. Wealth is something that each of us, I hope, is in pursuit of. But many times we don't have the blueprint, we don't have the formula or the strategy to help us achieve this goal. So this morning, I have my very good friend, Dr. Pamela Jolly, joining us to talk about wealth creation, and we're going to cover some specific areas to position you to take you right into what I call your wealthy place. Good morning, Pamela.
Good morning. How are you, Dr. Will?
I am doing extremely fantastic and getting better by the moment because I'm so excited for what everybody is getting ready to receive. I know Pamela gets nervous when I talk about her like this, but I had the privilege of meeting Pamela almost, I guess, 5 years ago now, and it has literally revolutionized my mindset. She has tremendously helped me. I consider her one of my wealth mentors, so I'm excited. Now, whenever you do this, I always want to set up this platform because I want you to understand what you're getting ready to get. So, Pamela, would you take just a few moments and kind of give us your resume, what you've been doing over the last 10 to 15 years in your study of wealth, and don't hold anything back. If you hold anything back, I'll come after you and pull it out of you. But share with us for a few moments some of the things that you've been doing, some of the projects, and some of the places that you've had the opportunity to share your legacy wealth training with.
Okay, all right, so I'll be obedient. So, I've spent my entire career in financial services. I started as a banker. And went on to be a strategist, a financial strategist. I worked in market research strategy, and then I launched my own business about 10 years ago. And that business is Torch Enterprises. And Torch stands for passing the torch from one generation to the next to build legacy wealth in our communities. And so I launched Torch because I wanted to see more people in communities that I really cared about learn how wealth is created through ownership. I was blessed to be able to work in the beautiful greater New Orleans area right after the storm, where I underwrote about $400 million in municipal grants to the different municipalities in Mississippi. And then I moved over to New Orleans and co-authored the strategic assessment of how to rebuild New Orleans. And there you had an opportunity to rebuild an entire community from the ground up. And so I'm very grateful for that experience because I really
Let me stop
learned.
you right there, Pamela, because you kind of glazed over it, and I want people to really understand what you just said. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, you were one of the individuals that was called in to create the rebuilding financial blueprint for that state.
Yeah, it was a strategic assessment of how to rebuild the greater New Orleans area. As you know, and as many of you have seen, post Katrina, New Orleans was devastated. The entire southern Gulf Coast was devastated. But our nation had never experienced a natural disaster of that proportion. So we had to rebuild everything from education to housing, community economic development, everything from the ground up. And there were a lot of inequalities before the storm, and after the storm that was exacerbated. So there was a need for a strategic assessment of how best to do it. And so there was a team, and I was the co-lead, and I was in charge of healthcare, education, community economic development, and housing. And I learned so much because as a banker, I funded and wrote loans for a variety of different organizations and even governments and not-for-profits. But here you are trying to figure out how to help bring people home, who had different socioeconomic levels, different current financial realities, but all desired to get back to a city that, quite frankly, 5 generations had lived. It's the oldest inhabited place in the nation. So I'm grateful for the 5 years that I spent in New Orleans because I learned so much, both as a contractor with FEMA and both as an entrepreneur helping organizations grow, build, and develop, and eventually come home. There were a lot of lessons learned, and those lessons really helped me further my journey and what happened for me. Faith, when you have lost everything, regardless of your faith tradition, what I have found is that faith becomes a currency in our community. And I started to see it in a very different way. And I learned best in a classroom. So after my work in New Orleans, I went to seminary because I kept hearing people say, in faith I did and my God said, but there was very low levels of business acumen. I mean, they wanted it and they believed in it, but they didn't quite know how to do it. And so I wanted to know how to integrate our faith and our finance. So I went to Boston University School of Theology and studied, because our nation 50 plus years ago had a dreamer named Martin Luther King, and that dream of equality is still lingering across our communities. And so Boston University is his alma mater. So I was able to study his archives, study the theologians that he studied, and looked to build a systematic theology around money so that I could better help people of whatever faith tradition align what they were believing in and what they wanted to see manifest with a level of business acumen so that it could. My journey has taken me all over the world. I've talked with over 6,800 people about their relationship with money. And those findings were very patterned. I'm someone that learns best in a classroom, but I also look for patterns. And the patterns led me to really see that we are more alike than different when we think about money. And our relationship with money falls into several different types of levels. What I wanted was for more people to understand the level they were in and the actual level they wanted to be in, and to find a way to get there.
So you brought up a very good point. You said you found out that after speaking with these 6,800 individuals, there's a relationship with money that each of us have, whether we recognize it, whether we understand it. Each of us, and this is something you've worked with me on, each of us are living out a money wealth story. And that's where I want to kind of lead this conversation to. You talk about in your book, Legacy Wealth, you talk about the wealth conversation. Can you kind of elaborate on what a wealth conversation is and how important it is for each individual to see where they are in that conversation and where they need to go?
Sure. So, wealth is a group process. No one builds wealth individually. I mean, you can become rich on your own, but for wealth to grow, it has to be collaborative because it requires so many different systems. And so every one of us has a story. But for me, a story goes in a circle, and it goes around and around and around. And so we all have what we want to do, the things that we have tried, the things that we're doing. And then we talk about what we want to do and the things that we've tried and the things that we're doing. And then we talk about the things that we want to do and the things that we tried and the things that we're doing. For me, I want us to shift the story to a narrative. A narrative has a direction. It has a starting point. It has a strategy to get to some other level and some levels of responsibility in which you have to do yourself, but then some things you can't do by yourself. And that narrative invites other people to join you. When you have a legacy wealth narrative, now you've got a perspective. That perspective is, here's where I am, here's where I desire to go, here's what I can do alone, here's what I can't do alone, and here's my strategy to figure out how to get beyond where I am to where I want to go. And so our relationship with money began in our childhood. Your first business experience is with your family. So how did your family work within their own family business to build money, wealth? What was the relationship with money? Now, once we leave our family nest, we always want to do something better or bigger. So what were the steps that you took to get there? Were they successful? Were they not successful? Do you try the same things over and over again? Are you clear about what you're best in? Do you know what you can do better than anybody else? Do you know what you can't do without the help of somebody else? Getting to that level of specificity is necessary for us to not just talk about wealth in a story, but build a narrative to be able to get there. And that's what I learned. A lot of us, well-intentioned, have stories. Very little of us have narratives. But the ones who do know that as long as the narrative is alive, and as long as they share the narrative, it actually is an invitation to be able to get to somewhere you have not gotten to with people who see where you want to go and see the benefit of you getting there and them helping you.
Okay, so let's really dig into this, and I'll use myself as an example. You said each of us have a story that needs to be formed into a narrative. So my story, for those that follow me, they know I was raised in Compton, California, by a single mother, by a father who at the time was one of the largest drug dealers in California. So that's my story. Now, how do I shape that? And we've talked about this in previous conversations. We shape that and we turn that story into a narrative, kind of form that for us, because we're going to have people listening to and watching this conversation from both spectrums, from those that grew up in the inner city to those that are affluent, because something you said, each of us are learning from our environments, but we all have a desire to do better than wherever we started from. Even if you grew up in an affluent community, you want to do better and you want to build upon what your parents have done. So how do we take that story and create a narrative?
So when you think about your story, being raised by a single mother and an enterprising father, albeit a drug dealer doing illegal activities, you came from a very entrepreneurial family, pretty much a startup. Your mother could really only afford to look at now. So her long-term perspective was on the immediate, making sure that her family was protected. Your father seems to be looking forward to next. So he didn't want the immediate to be the way it was. He wanted to change it. And so he used the best things that he knows how. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, every single one of us is a business. And so you came from two different ideologies, one focused on now, one focused on next. So coming from those two roads that converged to create you and your environment and your first relationship with money, where did you want to go from here? It sounds like, having known you for 5 years, you just didn't want to get there alone. You wanted to get there together. So Dr. Will speaks all over the country about what's possible, unlocking your genius code. He studied the greats, and he just doesn't want to be great himself. What he wants to do is recognize a group of people who are willing to do the work to be great with him. Because he knows that once he has a group of people who understand what he's come to understand, then you can build upon that even more. He's not just about himself, he's got a wife and children. And so he is planting seeds for a future he may not even live to see, but it's going to be better than the original place in Compton where he started. Not better meaning looking down on the people that live in Compton in the same position in which you were born, but better in terms of going further down the road, being more specific, and owning and understanding that there is more, and there's a way to get there, and you're charting a path that other people can take with you.
So I'm listening to you, and I have this mother who's single who is looking at the now, the day-to-day. How can I survive today? I have an entrepreneur father who is looking at what's next. So then you have me, that I joined this story. So now I see a lot of people fall maybe into this category, Pam, and maybe you can kind of help us out. So I have this goal, I have this desire to do more, do better, but I grew up in a system that glorified now, instant gratification. How can someone break that, and how can someone overcome that to now see how important legacy wealth is and to delay right now gratification?
So remember, I talked about a story, and then I talked about a narrative. And from the narrative, you'll have a legacy wealth perspective. You know, you can't change your mindset unless you want to, but you can shift your perspective further down the road. And so when I talk to many of my clients in the communities that I talk to across the country, yes, it's important to focus on now, but let's put now in a context that's affordable. But let's also cast your vision further down the road. What do you want for yourself? How do you build it? What's it going to cost you? And what do you have to start funding your way towards it? And so essentially, focused on now, it's important because when the threat of survival is high, you can't do anything else but that. But if you can chart a path beyond survival, and for me, quantify it, and not just build a budget, build a life spending plan. You know, we live in America. America has so many different opportunities when you can get specific about what you want. So many of us suffer from groupthink. We want what we think everybody else wants. But that's not true. That's not what I've seen in my research. What you want is exclusive to you if you take the time to define it. And once you're defined, what you'll find is people won't compete with you to get what you want because they don't want that. But they see that if you get it, and if they can help you get it, perhaps they can get closer to where they want to be. I saw it in New Orleans, and I see it in communities across the country. But it's a level of specificity that we all really need. And for me, that specificity is a budget. You have to understand your financials. But it also is a strategy. How do you connect what you have to get to a place where you want to be? And so that's where the fun begins for me. Because once I know what you want, it's just about multiplying your talents to get there.
Well, see, now you see why I was so excited to have this conversation with Dr. Pamela this morning. Now, Pam, I know you're right on the heels of releasing a brand new book entitled Legacy Wealth, a guide along the narrow road. Let's continue this conversation. How can someone begin to we get the narrative. Now, how can we take this narrative and begin to create wealth for our families?
So the first thing we have to do is define what wealth means for you. And so what I share across the country is that, listen, a lot of people talk about the wealth gap. They talk about the income gap. For me, I'm a pretty logical person. If you come from a segment of society that doesn't make as much money as that 1%, then you won't save as much money as that 1%, which means that you also won't invest as much money as the 1%. So why would you define wealth their way? If you don't have a definition that you believe in, how can wealth be attainable for you? So we have to first start with defining what wealth is for you. Because once you have a definition you own and you're confident in, all it is a choice. Do you want to do what you believe in or don't you? So a lot of people get frustrated with me when I say, well, how do you define wealth? Oh, well, Pamela, da 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 da. And they blurb off what they hear from other people. But that's not their definition. Many people don't even understand what they're saying. We have to start to distill what matters most to you. What assets do you have? What do you want? How do you want to keep them and preserve them and maintain them? How do you want to grow them? And yes, wealth is part financial, but it's only part financial, meaning money. There's so many other things that come into wealth in terms of the different capitals that are required. So we do an exploration. Because what I've learned is whatever you think, you're right. If you don't think wealth is possible, 9 times out of 10, it's not. But if you do believe, then we can define it. And once we define it, we anchor ourselves to it, and we keep moving forward. So this isn't metaphysical. It's not blurry. It's very specific, but it starts with you making your choices about the life that you really want.
So what you're saying is that wealth is personal, and a person has to get clear. You say specific. With my clients, I always say we have to get some clarity. I always say clarity breeds confidence. And so the way I explain it is you have to make a choice about a future desired result. If it's wealth, in financial, if it's wealth in physical, if it's wealth in spiritual, you have to make that choice. You have to choose that desired outcome. But then you come all the way back to today. Once you've made that choice, now you have to start making the decisions. So what are some decisions if a person is listening to us right now, they're shaping their narrative, they're making the choice that they want to choose a better financial position? What are some key decisions that that individual that is listening to us can start making? In your discovery, what are some of those key decisions that they need to make today?
I mean, the first one is fast or far. Do you want to go fast to your wealth position, or do you want to go far? Far meaning, do you want it to go beyond you? Do you want to be able to grow and develop with others, or do you just want to do it yourself? You know, there's two economic mindsets in the community. There's a middleman and there's a middle class. The middle class wants to earn their way towards wealth. The middleman wants to own their way towards wealth. What do you want to do? Fast or far? The other question is consistent, or are you willing to take some risks? Because many people jump into entrepreneurship without understanding what the definition of entrepreneur really is. And so there's different levels of entrepreneurship, but it's really all about your risk profile. Because the old adage that business is 80% the same and 20% different is really, really true. You do have to have a product. If that product is you, you also have to have a system. How are you going to exchange that, and what's the value? Some people like to reside within a structured system of market value, meaning he makes this amount of money as a wage, I make this amount of money as a wage, and it's standard. Some people want to get beyond that standard. Well, that takes on another level of risk. So how do you want to multiply your talents? Do you want to go fast, or do you want to go far? And do you want to be middle class, or do you want to be a middleman, or some hybrid of the two? So some decisions about what's your strategy to get there. Now, if you want to be middle class, then what do you need to have in terms of background, education, skill development, network, to be able to get the job that you need? But job is just one part of it. If you have a job with consistent income, I praise God for that. But what is the true value of your time? Are you saving and investing in addition to spending? What are you really doing with the time that you have? Because if you do have consistent income, if you do have a job, then your time is your money, period. And you can do a quick cash flow projection about how effective and efficient are you with your time, off the clock and on the clock, because you really have two different clocks. The corporate clock, they're going to get what they want. But what about your business clock? Are you getting what you want? Have you anchored it? So it's a series of questions that once you answer them, you start to see where your road is headed. Is it in a circle, or is it in a narrative? Are you telling yourself a story, or are you building a legacy wealth narrative? Do you know the direction you want to go? Do you understand what you need to be able to get there? Do you have the right systems in place to be able to help you? And so it may sound vague, but once you start to answer these questions, it starts to paint a very specific picture. And if you don't like what your narrative looks like, change your conversation. Start talking to different people about the real outcome that you want. So my work is very revealing. First, by just asking you simple questions that you think you know the answers to. But it's not until you go within. It's not until you really get an understanding of what you really believe, not just what you're telling yourself, that you can start to chart a path towards legacy wealth.
Now that's interesting, because I love what you're saying here, and I know we've been given the audience a whole mouthful, and I know their brains are steaming right now. But one of the things that I really want to emphasize is that this really is a choice that each and every individual can make, they need to make, and they have to make if they're serious about legacy wealth. And
Well,
good
it's a
work.
choice that they are making, whether they are conscious of it or not, because wealth is going to be created by you. Whether or not you are a creator of wealth and a wealth creator for yourself is really the choice. Anyone and everyone who earns an income is building wealth for somebody. What I'm asking people to do is make the additional choice to have some of that wealth be built for you.
And I don't want us to miss that because you just said you're building wealth either way. Either you're building it for someone else or you're building it for yourself. And for many people probably listening to us, Pamela, they need to learn how to build it for someone else because the majority of the people listening to us probably have a traditional job. So you are building it for someone else, but then how do they begin to build it for themselves? Can you give us some key
Yeah.
strategies that you outline in your book, Legacy Wealth?
I think one of the exciting things for people who do work for other people is that you have a model that's already working because it's working so well they can afford you. And so, seeing is believing. 95% of us have to see it to believe it. Well, every day you go to work, you see wealth being created. So, how can you mirror what you do to create wealth for others in your own life? There's some basics, 401ks, talking to a financial planner, having a good relationship with your bank. But I like to start first with writing your vision and making it plain. What does it really cost to be you? And how happy are you being the you that you are? So if you're operating cash flow, for me, financial literacy is the baby step towards creating wealth. What we're trying to get to is financial literacy, to financial management, to financial investment, to financial acumen. Acumen is the ability to make shrewd decisions. I have clients that range from people who didn't think they had a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out, to people who had a lot of money but weren't managing it correctly. It starts first with taking inventory with who you are. If you work 40 hours a week and you make $50,000 a year, or if you work 40 hours a week and you make $35,000 a year, your market value, your hourly wage is a simple calculation. Let's start with that. How long do you have to work to afford the life that you want? That picture needs to be known. And then from there, is there room to grow? Because growth comes with savings and investment. Now, the average person needs to borrow for a $5,000 emergency. So of course, and I'm not saying anything you don't know, you need an emergency reserve. You have to have it. And so until you get that reserve, survival is where you have to focus. To get beyond survival, you need a cushion. You need something to be able to make sure that when things don't go the way you think they'll go, your life does not stop. The next level is you need some systems in your life. Many of us aren't held financially accountable, which means that you need to have clear financial goals that you share with your family and your friends, that you talk about on a regular basis, that you measure, and that you look at the successes and the failures. From there, you've got a group. You have a wealth team that basically says, you know what, I want you to get there, and I want to get there too. From there, you can trust that you aren't leaning to your own understanding. But yes, you're praying about it, but you're also talking with people who may know more than you know or know somebody that you need to know. Those choices are yours. Once we get to that place where you've got a group of people that you can talk openly and honestly about your money with, look at your budget for what it is. Now we're building a platform to be able to grow. Growth is nothing but a strategy, and much of your strategy is independent. So what do you need to learn to feel more confident of your relationship with money and your ability to grow it? For many African Americans, creating wealth for others is nothing new. Creating wealth for themselves is uncharted territory. Yet wealth is nothing new for this economy. this nation. So there are some people that we might not feel comfortable talking to that we're going to have to. So that's why the financial literacy has to come into play. If you don't know the words, you can't build the wealth. So we all have some learning to do. But let's learn from an unbiased party, someone who doesn't financially benefit from teaching us. And once we get the basics, then we can pay to learn how to grow with what we know.
So Pamela, so I just, as you know, just finished up a new book, Copycat Millionaire, and that's one of the things that I wanted to convey. I got that premise, and everybody keeps asking me the copycat. I got that premise from a scripture that says there's nothing new under the sun, and another scripture that says imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. And so your book, my book, is really trying to hammer down the message that there's already a strategic blueprint in place. And so those that really are serious about creating wealth for themselves, they just need to begin the process of getting in the right places, having these right conversations, and then doing the work that it takes. And so someone's listening to us and someone's going to join this conversation. What is something they can do to really begin to have this conversation, break away from that now narrative where, you know, we're doing this conversation right after Black Friday, or I think they call it Black Friday, whatever they call it, where hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people flooded the department stores and spent a whole lot of money building someone else's wealth. How can we begin to break that pattern within our community?
You know, I have a belief that whatever you think, you're right. So for some, consumption is a game that some have to play until they understand that you can't consume your way into wealth creation. I think that I do agree with you that there are several paths to wealth, but I think I have a bit of a different perspective in terms of how best to get there. I don't think it starts with conversation. I think it starts with introspection, and then it moves into, you got to know how you learn, and then you got to learn how you learn. Now, I can say that you are on the narrow road, and you are a speaker thinker. So conversations are how you learn. Dialogue. So talking with the many people that you talk to in your book makes a lot of sense, because that's how you capture information. That's not how everybody captures information. You got to learn how you learn. How do you capture and process information so that it can work for you? And then what do you do to do what you do best? Everyone has a specific talent that is what I call their income generator. You got to know what that is specifically. And then lastly, everyone has a weak spot. That place that without some structure, without some guidance, without some collaboration, you can be well-intentioned but all over the place. And so when you know those specific pieces, what I have found is that the vision can be made manifest, because you know how to make it as plain as you need to make it to be able to remain committed to it. So essentially what I'm saying is, get to know yourself, because there is so much great information out here. For people who follow you, Will, I mean, you give so much information and so much skills. And there's so many books out there that can talk to you about wealth and talk to you about how to become rich. But until you know your own secret for success, it's going to be difficult for you to apply it with consistency for the long term. I'm a long game girl. I play the long game. The long game is understanding that the road is not to the swift, it's not to the fast, but time and chance happens to us all. And if you know yourself in time, the chances that you take will work in your favor.
So in your book, Legacy Wealth, your work has span the last 10 years, I believe, and you've created this narrow road. Talk to us about the narrow road. Talk to us about someone interested in beginning this introspective trip with themselves. This work, I mean, is probably the most game changing work that I've come across in all my studying. And you know, Pamela, that that's how I learn. I study, I have conversations. But when I met you 5 years ago, and the reason why I'm so passionate about you getting your message out, I've read so many topical messages. I've read so many per se get rich quick, and I've seen so many people get duped. But the work that you've done in this book, Legacy Wealth, and the work that you've done through the narrow road, I really believe is the blueprint of what any individual can follow to get to their wealthy place. So talk to us about how you started the narrow road journey. Give us some examples of what you've been doing with this narrow road and how we can be a part of it.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Will, because I mean, your words really inspire me to continue with this work. And, you know, the narrow road was a gift for me. I caught a glimpse of it really 12 years ago. And it really wasn't until I took a leap of faith and started my own business and the steps just started moving towards me as I towards it, that it became very clear for me. And it's something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. The narrow road is now patent pending, which means that I took the time to convert a business system so that people can take it with a level of accuracy. You know, in the Bible it says, wide is the gate, but narrow is the road. Few find it, and even fewer take it. For me, you know, wide is the gate of life, but narrow is the road of legacy wealth. The narrow road with one question types you and gives you a wealth identity called a narrow road identity. Once you start to answer the questions, you start to unlock your wealth code. You start to unlock the steps that you have to take to build wealth your way. And what I've been able to do with it is it started out with those 6,800 conversations, talking with men, women, business owners, elders, youths, adults, and pastors about their relationship with money, looking at the patterns, and then testing the patterns that I found with over 15,000 people, and then further refining it with an additional 25,000 people. So there's a predictive modeling component. There's 24 unique identities in the narrow road, and one of them is yours. Once we have that, we know where to journey. What my book does for you is to give you a context about why I am so passionate about this, but why I do know this is not just a part of my purpose, but this is a part of the purpose of our community, to build wealth together. The book walks you through the context of who I am, how I came to this, and how I developed it. And then it allows you to type yourself. And then I walk through the basic tenets of how wealth is created. How do we get out of the financial wilderness and start to build a promised land of ourselves, for ourselves that we believe in, we can take possession of, and we can pass on for generations. So this book is the beginning of what I hope is a legacy wealth journey that we can take together. Post this book, there'll be a primer. At the end of each chapter is the glimpse of a primer. And then from there, there's a whole host of things custom tailored for you and your identity, your wealth group. Some of you want to go all the way down the road. Some of you want to just get past the focus on today. Whatever it is that you want to do, you're right in wanting it. The narrow road helps you chart a path to it so that you can build the right pieces of your puzzle so that it can map towards a blueprint for your legacy wealth. However you define it, because you are the owner of your own enterprise. It's time for you to take control of it.
Pam, I am so excited about this book coming out because I know what it's going to do for so many individuals so many families. That has been my heart cry. I believe that when you change yourself, when you transform yourself, you're transforming the generations that come behind you. And your work, what you've done in Legacy Wealth and the Narrow Road, I know it's going to be transformational. Instant classic. It's going to be one of those books that really, what I call a mirror, because you can't read that book and you can't work with Pamela without looking at yourself. She starts with you, and for the last 5 years, she's been even teaching me how to look at myself and answer those tough questions. And so if you're on this hangout and you're listening and you are serious about taking your life, your wealth, your family, your legacy to the next level, you want to connect with Dr. Pamela Jolly. I'm telling you, your life will never be the same. Those of you that follow me, you know I don't go out on the limb for too many people, but I feel 100% safe in saying that when you partner with Dr. Pamela Jolly on this narrow road journey, your life will never be the same. So, Pamela, how can they connect with you? Where can they find more about your work? If someone wants to get their church, their organization, their company, their family involved in the narrow road, what do they need to do?
So a couple things. My company website is torch-enterprises.com. My personal site is thejollyjourney.org. You can sign up both ways. If you want to be put on an exclusive list, because the first edition of my book is going to be for an exclusive group of people. I just don't want to write a book and have people read it. I really want to journey with you. I've spent 10 years of my life to figure out what's the best way to teach all different types of people the ability to be able to build wealth for themselves. I didn't really talk much about myself. My father, who recently passed away, I learned best in a classroom. And what he often would say is that the longer I'm in school, the dumber I get. He said, what good is it to get all that education and not be able to explain it to people that look like you and care about the things that you care about? And so I do have 4 degrees, but the last degree was a doctorate of education. And I did that so that I could distill this down into curricula that can educate anybody. I've written curricula on the university level for non-business thinkers, and I've taught them finance and accounting. I know I can do it for you, and I want to be able to do that. If you want to be on the list of a select group of people who will be given an exclusive invite for my book and primer, text book to 610-200-6118. That's book to 610-200-6118. And you'll be given a specific link at the appropriate time. And what I want you to do is read the book and let's talk about it. Let's journey together with it for 90 days. At the end of that, what you will have is a legacy wealth blueprint, something you understand and can take to people who understand more than you and help you chart a path to where you want to go. One of the questions that Will asked that I didn't answer was what I've done with this. I've traveled across the country and I help national organizations, financial institutions, individuals, and business owners how to get specific about what it is they want and how to use what they have to be able to get there. There is a law embedded within the Jobs Act called Title III. And once it gets passed, non-accredited investors, those are people like you and me, who don't have $2 million in net worth and don't make over $250,000 on a continuum. Regular, everyday people will be able to pool their monies together and make strategic investments in small businesses. I want people who want to build wealth in their own communities to be able to participate in this opportunity. It's going to change the game, but you must have financial and business acumen to get there. My book helps you prepare for that by owning first yourself and then your path to be your best self. That's what I want for you. I want whatever it is that you want. So text book to 610-200-6118 and let's begin a journey together I told Will, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. When I first met him, we had some of the most powerful conversations. What I'm so proud about is that he just didn't take it from a conversation. He took it beyond that, and he did something with it. I want you to take what you hear, take what you feel, and take what you want and create a blueprint out of it to create a life that you want. Because the more improvement you have in your life, the more improvement we will have in our communities. Because this is a place where if you believe it, you can own it. And once you own it, you can build wealth with it. So text book to 610-200-6118. Visit me at one of my websites, and let's join the journey together.
You know, we're at a critical time in our nation, especially here in the United States, and so many people have asked me, inboxed me, requested me to come and speak, and they've been looking for answers. I believe that this conversation that we had this morning, and when you go out and you connect with Pamela, it's going to provide the answers. How do we move forward? What do we systematically need to do to move ourselves forward by taking personal ownership, by moving our families forward, which in turn move our communities forward? I believe that the work of the narrow road is the answer. So I'm telling you that are listening to me, share this video with those you love. Share this video with your pastors. Share this video with community leaders. Share this video with individuals that are serious about creating legacy wealth and making themselves better, that they can make our communities better, and in turn make this nation better and be the nation we know it to be. We've done some wonderful things here in America, but I still believe that we have a long way to go. And that way that we need to go, I truly believe, is the narrow road. So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I already know that Pamela and I are going to have to do this several more times. She didn't even scratch the surface. She didn't even scratch, I'm telling you guys, take it from me. She didn't even scratch the surface. And so we're going to have to do this a couple of more times, but it starts here. If you want to connect with me, please go to Facebook, Dr. Will Speaks. I'm on Twitter at Dr. Will Speaks. This video is going to be on my YouTube channel, Dr. Will Speaks. So please connect with me. If you want more information about me or Pamela, just hit me up on any one of those social media platforms and we can continue the conversation. Remember what I always say, live genius, because average is no fun. Until next time, be blessed.
Take care.